What if your deepest pain isn't about what was done to you, but what you abandoned in yourself to survive? Today, more than ever, the world echoes with the whispers of a profound yearning, a silent ache within the feminine soul. It is the deep-seated longing to reclaim an untamed power, a spiritual femininity often stifled by the clamor of external expectations and the rigid structures of modern life. This inherent power, an echo of ancient goddesses and forgotten wisdom, is not about dominance or control, but about a luminous inner authority, a radiant self-possession that emanates from the deepest wellsprings of being. Yet, so many find themselves adrift, tethered to the opinions of others, their inner compass swayed by the winds of societal approval. They strive to fit molds that do not honor their authentic contours, leading to an insidious erosion of self-worth, a quiet despair that manifests as the inability to truly embody their unique and potent essence. The pain of this disconnect is palpable, a feeling of being perpetually misunderstood, of constantly performing, of sacrificing one's deepest desires on the altar of external validation. Alara had always moved through life with a gentle deference, her voice a soft murmur, her opinions pliable as willow branches in a breeze. From a young age, she had absorbed the unspoken lesson that harmony was paramount, and her role was to be the tranquilizer, the soother of ruffled feathers, the one who always yielded. This was especially true in the presence of her mother, a woman of formidable will and sharp judgments, whose love felt conditional, granted only when Alara seamlessly conformed to her exacting standards. The smallest deviation, a forgotten chore, an unconventional thought, would unleash a storm of disapproval, leaving Alara feeling shipwrecked in a sea of inadequacy. Her mother's shadow loomed large, a pervasive presence even when she was absent, shaping Alara's every decision, every aspiration. Alara learned to anticipate, to appease, to perform a delicate ballet of conformity, hoping to earn the elusive prize of unconditional acceptance. This ingrained pattern extended into her friendships, where she was the perpetual listener, the comforting presence, the one who rarely voiced a dissenting opinion, fearing that any expression of true self would fracture the fragile bonds she so desperately clung to. As she stepped into adulthood, this deferential nature became the bedrock of her romantic relationships. Her first serious love, Liam, was a charismatic artist, whose creative fire burned with an intense, demanding heat. He saw in Alara a blank canvas, a quiet muse upon whom he could project his grand visions. He would often speak of her serenity and unassuming nature, praising her for qualities that, in truth, were born of her suppression. Alara, starved for affection and affirmation, drank in his words like a parched traveler in a desert. She became a chameleon, subtly shifting her hues to match his, absorbing his interests, his friends, even his political views, until her own identity blurred into an indistinct background. The small, nascent desires she harbored to explore her own art, to travel to distant lands, to simply sit in quiet contemplation without an agenda, were carefully tucked away, deemed too insignificant, too selfish to warrant expression. She found herself in a constant state of anticipatory anxiety, always trying to predict Liam's moods, to preempt his criticisms, to mold herself into the perfect reflection of his desires. A casual comment from him about her fashion choices would send her into a frenzy of wardrobe revisions. A slight frown over her musical preferences would lead her to abandon her beloved folk songs for his preferred avant-garde jazz. The turning point, or rather, the series of tiny cracks that eventually led to a seismic shift, began subtly. One crisp autumn evening, Liam critiqued a simple meal Alara had prepared. It wasn't a harsh criticism, just a dismissive wave of his hand, a comment about it lacking flair. In that moment, a flicker of something unfamiliar ignited within Alara. Not anger, not sadness, but a curious, quiet defiance. It was a spark of her own innate worth, momentarily untainted by the need for his approval. The next day, she found herself sketching in a forgotten notebook, something she hadn't done since childhood. The lines flowed freely, unjudged, uncurated. It was a small act of rebellion, a secret act of reclamation. The feeling, once awakened, began to spread, She started noticing the uncomfortable knot in her stomach whenever Liam made a decision without consulting her. The subtle sting when her opinions were brushed aside as cute or naive. One evening, while at a gallery opening with Liam, she overheard a conversation between two artists discussing a piece she found deeply moving, while Liam dismissed it as derivative. For the first time, Ilara felt a distinct surge of her own aesthetic judgment, a genuine connection to the art that diverged sharply from his. Instead of nodding along, she found herself offering a quiet, yet firm, counterpoint to Liam's opinion. The surprise on his face was fleeting, quickly replaced by a patronizing smile. But the internal shift within Ilara was profound. She had spoken her truth, however small, and the world had not collapsed. The real upheaval came during a trip they took to a remote coastal town. Liam had meticulously planned every detail, every meal, every activity, leaving no room for spontaneity or Ilara's preferences. One afternoon, Ilara, feeling an inexplicable pull towards the wild, untamed coastline, suggested they deviate from his carefully curated itinerary to explore a hidden cove she had seen on a local map. Liam, ever the planner, scoffed, declaring it a waste of time, full of nothing but rocks. A familiar wave of despair washed over Ilara, the old habit of capitulation tugging at her. But then, she looked at the desolate beauty of the waves crashing against the cliffs, and something shifted. A deep, primal instinct urged her to defy him. With a quiet resolve that surprised even herself, she simply stated, "I'm going anyway." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken rebellion. Liam's face contorted in a mixture of shock and indignation. He fumed, he argued, he even threatened to leave her there. But Ilara, for the first time, stood her ground. She walked to the cove alone, the salty wind whipping through her hair, the roar of the ocean a powerful symphony of freedom. As she stood on the craggy rocks, gazing out at the vast, indifferent sea, a profound sense of self-possession washed over her. It wasn't about spite or anger towards Liam. It was about honoring an internal compass that had long been ignored. The path to the cove was arduous, the rocks sharp, but with each step, a layer of fear, of ingrained deference, began to shed. She spent hours there, lost in the raw majesty of nature, a sense of wholeness she had never known blossoming within her. When she returned, Liam was gone. He had left, as he had threatened, taking with him the illusion of her happiness, but leaving behind the nascent seeds of her true self. Ilara's journey embodies the archetype of the dependent maiden, a woman whose inherent worth and spiritual femininity have been overshadowed by the deep-seated need for external validation, often stemming from early childhood experiences. This archetype, in its shadow aspect, becomes a reflection of others' desires, perpetually seeking approval and fearing abandonment, much like the anima projection in Jungian psychology, where one's inner feminine is projected onto external figures. The pervasive pain for such a woman is the constant erosion of her authentic self, a slow, vanishing act performed to maintain perceived harmony and connection. Her narrative reveals the crucial process of individuation, not as a dramatic explosion, but as a series of quiet, courageous internal shifts, each small act of self-assertion chipping away at the rigid edifice of the ego projection she had adopted to please others. The main plot twist is not an external event, but an internal awakening, the recognition that true love and validation must first originate from within. For the woman who finds herself in the intricate dance of seeking external validation, the path to reclaiming your untamed power begins with shadow work. This is the courageous descent into the parts of yourself you have denied, suppressed, or deemed unacceptable in the pursuit of external approval. What truths have you silenced? What desires have you abandoned? Observe the subtle ways you mold yourself for others. Notice the discomfort that arises when you are about to speak your truth, and lean into that discomfort. Embrace the wisdom of stoicism, understanding that while you cannot control others' reactions, you hold absolute power over your own responses and internal state. Ask yourself, what would I do if I were truly free, unburdened by the need for approval? Begin with small, seemingly insignificant acts of defiance against the tyranny of others' expectations. Choose the movie you want to see, voice your genuine opinion in a casual conversation, or simply spend time alone pursuing an interest that brings you joy, without explanation or apology. These small acts are anchors, pulling you back to your true self. The healing pain of recognizing this pattern is the crucible from which true self-worth is forged. Remember, your spiritual femininity is not fragile. It is an indomitable force waiting to be unleashed. It resides in your authentic expression, your sovereign choices, and your unwavering belief in your inherent right to simply be. The world does not need another echo. It desperately yearns for the unique song only you can sing. Have you ever felt the subtle, insidious pull of unacknowledged power, the kind that masquerades as self-sacrifice, but secretly drains your vitality? This is the second common thread weaving through the tapestry of women's experiences, often unnoticed until its bitter fruit is born. The silent bargain where a woman, in her profound capacity for empathy and nurturing, becomes the unacknowledged backbone of another's success, sacrificing her own aspirations on the altar of a partner's ambition. It's a complex psychological phenomenon, deeply rooted in historical narratives and societal conditioning, where a woman's true worth becomes inextricably linked to her ability to uplift and support, rather than to lead and create in her own right. This dynamic, often cloaked in the guise of devotion, can lead to a profound sense of disillusionment, a chilling realization that one's light has been dimmed to illuminate another's path, leaving a cavernous void where self-realization should reside. The pain here is a quiet gnawing, a feeling of being perpetually in the wings, while the main act unfolds without you. Isolde possessed a fierce intellect and an insatiable curiosity, her mind a vibrant garden of ideas and aspirations. From her earliest memories, she had nurtured dreams of building something significant, something that would leave a tangible mark on the world. She envisioned herself as a creator, an innovator, shaping concepts into concrete realities. However, life, in its subtle and often deceptive ways, guided her down a different path, one that intertwined with a man named Gareth. Gareth was a visionary, a man of grand schemes and magnetic charisma, whose ideas sparked like constellations in a dark sky. He saw in Isolde not just a brilliant mind, but a meticulously organized one, a rare combination of strategic thinking and practical execution. He often lauded her as his anchor, his rock, the one who could translate his lofty visions into actionable plans. Their relationship began with a whirlwind of shared intellectual passion. Isolde found herself captivated by Gareth's boundless energy and his audacious plans to launch a groundbreaking tech startup. She saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who also dared to dream big. What began as supportive discussions over late-night coffees soon morphed into full-time dedication. Isolde became Gareth's silent partner, not in title, but in every conceivable function. She crafted the business plans, refined the algorithms, managed the finances, and even handled the often unpleasant task of negotiating with skeptical investors. Her days were a relentless cycle of problem-solving, meticulous planning, and unwavering support, all performed with the quiet efficiency of a shadow. When Gareth would stand on stage, delivering a rousing speech about their burgeoning enterprise, Isolde would be in the audience, her heart swelling with a complex mix of pride and a faint, unacknowledged ache. He would invariably thank his incredible team, and sometimes, if he remembered, would give a fleeting nod to her invaluable support, a phrase that, over time, began to ring hollow in her ears. The subtle betrayals accumulated like grains of sand, imperceptible at first, but slowly forming a suffocating dune. There was the time a journalist, interviewing Gareth, praised his singular genius, and Gareth, instead of correcting the narrative, simply smiled and accepted the accolades, while Isolde, sitting just feet away, felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Then came the moment when a major investor, impressed by Isolde's incisive answers during a pitch, directly addressed her with a question, only for Gareth to smoothly intercept, rephrasing her answer as his own insight. Isolde felt a flash of indignant heat, quickly suppressed, replaced by the familiar quiet resignation. She told herself it was for the greater good, for the success of their venture. She rationalized that her contributions were integral even if unacknowledged. She embraced the philosophy of Stoicism, not as a tool for inner peace, but as a rigid shield against the rising tide of her own frustrated ambition. She convinced herself that true strength lay in enduring, in serving, in the selfless dedication to a higher purpose, Gareth's purpose. The startup soared, gaining traction, attracting significant investment, and drawing the attention of industry giants. Gareth became a celebrated figure, his face gracing the covers of business magazines, his name synonymous with innovation. Isolde, meanwhile, remained in the background, her name a footnote, if it appeared at all, in the sprawling narrative of their success. She watched him thrive, bathed in the spotlight, and a quiet bitterness began to fester within her. It was not envy, not entirely, but a profound sadness for the vibrant garden of her own potential, now lying fallow. The more successful Gareth became, the more diminished Isolde felt, her identity shrinking to encompass only her role as his indispensable assistant, his silent partner. The initial passion that had fueled her dedication began to curdle into resentment, a slow-burning fire of unfulfilled ambition. One evening, after Gareth had returned from a triumphant conference, where he had been lauded as a visionary, Isolde found herself staring at her own reflection. She saw a woman who looked tired, whose eyes, once bright with intellectual fire, now held a weary resignation. It was a face she barely recognized. A fragment of an old memory surfaced. Her grandmother, a woman of quiet strength who had always cautioned her, "Never let your flame be used to light another's path if it means your own will extinguish." The wisdom of her ancestors, a faint whisper in the wind, began to penetrate the fortress of her self-denial. The pain, long suppressed, broke through, not as a scream, but as a deep, shuddering sob. It was the sound of a soul acknowledging its own suffering, its own neglect. The next morning, Isolde approached Gareth. Her voice, though trembling, carried a newfound firmness. She spoke not of accusation, but of her own burgeoning need, her desire to cultivate her own intellectual garden. She articulated her decision to step back, to reclaim her time, her energy, and her creative sovereignty. Gareth, initially shocked, then defensive, attempted to dissuade her, citing their shared journey, the team effort. But Isolde, drawing on a strength she hadn't known she possessed, remained resolute. Her words were not spoken in anger, but with the quiet authority of a woman who had finally chosen herself. The conversation was difficult, tearful on Gareth's part, but Isolde held her ground, a quiet revolution unfolding within her. She left the successful enterprise, leaving behind the immense financial gain, but taking with her something far more valuable: her untamed self, poised on the precipice of its own magnificent unfolding. She started her own venture, a small, independent research firm focused on sustainable technology. And for the first time, she truly thrived, her own light illuminating her own path. Isolde's narrative illuminates the insidious nature of unacknowledged power, a common manifestation of the feminine shadow when an individual's potent capacities are diverted and absorbed by another. This archetypal pattern, often seen in the anima/animus dynamic where the internal feminine or masculine qualities are projected onto a partner, transforms the natural inclination to nurture and support into a self-sacrificing act that diminishes one's own vital essence. The central theme of her story is the profound psychological cost of living in the shadow of another's success, illustrating a subtle form of trauma psychology where a woman internalizes the belief that her worth is derived from her utility to others, rather than from her inherent being. Her journey from silent enabler to self-sovereign creator is a testament to the transformative power of confronting one's own self-betrayal and reclaiming one's rightful place in the sun. This is a crucial step in individuation, recognizing that true partnership thrives when both individuals are whole and self-actualized, not when one becomes a mere extension of the other. For you, if you recognize echoes of Isolde's experience in your own life, the path to reclaiming your untamed power demands a fearless inventory of your current dynamics. Begin by identifying the areas where your light is being dimmed to illuminate another's path. Where are you overgiving, over-supporting, or silently sacrificing your own aspirations for the perceived benefit of someone else? This is not about blame, but about conscious awareness. Embrace the principles of applied psychology and the profound wisdom of figures like Dale Carnegie, but reframe them for your self-empowerment. While effective communication and understanding others are vital, ensure these tools are used to advocate for your needs and boundaries, not to perpetually adapt to others' demands. Engage in shadow work by acknowledging the fear that underlies your self-sacrifice, perhaps the fear of rejection, of conflict, or of being seen as selfish. What old narratives, perhaps from childhood or past relationships, are still dictating your behavior? The solution lies in the courageous act of setting boundaries, not as walls of separation, but as acts of self-preservation and self-respect. Start small. Decline a request that drains your energy without offering anything in return. Articulate a personal preference, or simply take time for yourself without explanation. Remember, your spiritual femininity thrives on authenticity and the courageous expression of your unique gifts. Your strength lies not in enduring silent martyrdom, but in the fierce protection of your own sacred energy and the unapologetic pursuit of your own dreams. Your worth is not contingent on your ability to make others shine. It is an intrinsic brilliance waiting to be fully unleashed. Reclaim your narrative, for the world awaits the unique symphony only you can compose when you are truly playing your own magnificent notes. What would you think if I told you that the deepest pain, the most tenacious emotional shackles, often stem not from external forces, but from the unexamined narratives we tell ourselves, particularly about our own worth and capacity for joy? This is the third, and perhaps most subtle, aspect of the modern woman's journey toward reclaiming her untamed spiritual femininity. The internal critic, the pervasive sense of unworthiness, and the unconscious resistance to true happiness and fulfillment. It is a pain born from years of subtle messages, societal expectations, and personal disappointments that coalesce into a rigid inner prison, preventing the full blossoming of one's authentic self. The agony here is the self-imposed limit, the quiet forfeiture of joy, and the profound disconnect from the vibrant, intuitive wisdom that resides within. Anya had always possessed a luminous spirit, a natural effervescence that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Yet, beneath the sparkling surface, a persistent current of anxiety ran deep. She excelled in her career as a therapist, guiding others through their emotional labyrinth with profound empathy and insightful wisdom. She was beloved by her friends, a beacon of support and understanding. But when it came to her own life, a curious pattern emerged. Just as happiness seemed within her grasp, just as a relationship deepened or a professional milestone was achieved, an almost imperceptible self-sabotage would begin. It was not a conscious act, but a subtle shift, a sudden surge of doubt, a withdrawal, a manufactured crisis that would inevitably disrupt the burgeoning joy. Her childhood, outwardly idyllic, held a subtle undercurrent of emotional neglect. Her parents, though well-meaning, were emotionally distant, consumed by their own anxieties and expectations. Anya learned early that overt expressions of need or vulnerability were met with awkward silence or dismissive platitudes. She internalized the message that her emotional landscape was her burden alone, and that true strength lay in self-sufficiency, in never needing too much. This laid the foundation for a pervasive sense of unworthiness, a belief that she was fundamentally too much or not enough, depending on the context. This core belief, lurking in her shadow, manifested as a deep-seated fear of true intimacy. She unconsciously believed that if someone truly saw her, truly loved her for who she was, they would inevitably discover her perceived flaws and abandon her. This was the source of her self-sabotage, a preemptive strike against imagined future pain. This pattern played out most painfully in her romantic relationships. There was Julian, a kind and stable man who adored her. Their connection was deep, their conversations flowed effortlessly, and for the first time, Anya felt a genuine sense of peace. But as their bond strengthened, a subtle panic began to brew within her. She started to find fault where there was none, to interpret his genuine affection as pity, to invent reasons for conflict. One evening, after Julian had spoken of a future together, Anya suddenly felt a suffocating pressure. Her inner critic, a harsh, relentless voice, whispered, "You don't deserve this. He'll see the real you eventually and he'll leave." Overwhelmed by this internal narrative, she provoked an argument over a trivial matter, escalating it with an intensity that shocked even herself. Julian, bewildered and hurt, withdrew. The relationship, once promising, crumbled under the weight of Anya's unexamined fear. She sought solace in her work, immersing herself in the complex emotional lives of her clients. She lectured on the importance of self-worth, on challenging limiting beliefs, on the necessity of healing pain from past trauma. Yet, the disconnect between her professional wisdom and personal experience became an increasingly bitter pill. She preached the very liberation she denied herself. She read Marcus Aurelius, clinging to the Stoic ideal of rational self-control, believing that if she could simply think her way out of this emotional trap, she would be free. But the emotional patterns, rooted deeper than logic, persisted. The turning point came not in a grand epiphany, but in a moment of profound exhaustion. Anya was guiding a client through an exercise on self-compassion, asking her to visualize her inner child and offer it unconditional love. As the client closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, Anya felt an unexpected, visceral pang in her own chest. It was a wave of overwhelming sadness, a recognition of the profound lack of compassion she had shown her own inner child, the unhealed wounds she had continually ignored. The client's pain became a mirror to her own. That night, Anya sat alone in her quiet apartment, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a deep stillness. She allowed the torrent of suppressed emotions to surface. The fear of abandonment, the shame of unworthiness, the profound loneliness of always pushing love away. She didn't try to intellectualize it, to analyze it, or to stoically suppress it. She simply felt it. The pain was excruciating, a raw ache in her soul, but with it came a strange sense of release. It was as if the dam holding back a lifetime of unacknowledged grief had finally broken. In the days that followed, Anya began a different kind of shadow work. Instead of intellectually dissecting her patterns, she began to gently observe them, like a compassionate witness. When the familiar surge of self-doubt arose, she would acknowledge it without judgment, simply noting its presence. She began to treat herself with the same kindness and understanding she offered her clients. She started small, allowing herself to receive a compliment without deflecting it, accepting an offer of help, indulging in a moment of pure, unadulterated joy without immediately searching for the catch. She re-engaged with her love of painting, not with an agenda or a desire for external validation, but purely for the quiet joy of creation. She opened herself up to new connections, allowing herself to be seen, imperfections and all. The process was slow, sometimes painful, but each step was a profound act of self-love, a reclamation of her innate wholeness. She learned that true healing pain was not about erasing the past, but about integrating it, understanding its lessons, and choosing a new narrative. She realized that her spiritual femininity was not something to be earned or proven, but an inherent, untamed force that simply was. Anya's profound journey into the depths of her own psyche illustrates the archetypal manifestation of the wounded healer, a woman whose immense capacity to guide and support others is paradoxically tethered by her own unaddressed core wounds, particularly the pervasive sense of unworthiness. This internal narrative, often rooted in early experiences of emotional neglect or conditional love, creates a powerful ego projection where the self-sabotage becomes a defense mechanism against anticipated pain, a tragic attempt to control the narrative of abandonment. It is a classic example of trauma psychology manifesting as an unconscious resistance to true joy and intimacy, blocking the vital process of individuation where one integrates all aspects of the self, including the shadow. Her eventual liberation reveals that the most potent form of healing pain comes not from intellectual understanding alone, but from a brave descent into the emotional landscape of one's own suffering, embracing vulnerability as the ultimate pathway to liberation. For you, if Anya's story resonates, the path to unlocking your untamed spiritual femininity lies in confronting the internal critic, that relentless voice that whispers, "You're not enough," or "You don't deserve this." Begin by recognizing this voice as a separate entity, a defense mechanism born of past pain, rather than your inherent truth. Practice the art of radical self-compassion, offering yourself the same understanding and patience you would extend to a beloved friend. This is where the practical wisdom of Stoicism finds its true power, not in suppressing emotion, but in observing your internal narratives without judgment, understanding that while you cannot control every thought, you can choose how you respond to them. Engage in profound shadow work by identifying the specific moments or situations where your self-worth seems to crumble. What underlying beliefs are triggered? What old fears surface? The solution lies in a conscious, consistent repatterning of your internal dialogue. When the negative self-talk arises, gently redirect it. Replace "I don't deserve this" with "I am worthy of joy and love." Actively seek out experiences that affirm your worth, however small they may seem. Dare to be vulnerable, allowing others to see your authentic self, knowing that true connection is built on genuine acceptance, not on curated perfection. Your untamed power, your spiritual femininity, is not a reward for overcoming your flaws. It is the inherent, radiant essence that exists beneath all of them. It thrives on authenticity, self-acceptance, and the courageous choice to open your heart fully to life, with all its inherent beauty and imperfections. The ultimate release comes from letting go of the need for external validation, and from finding a profound, peaceful inner rebirth, recognizing that your deepest self is already whole, already magnificent. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others to spread positive values in life. The end.